Memorial Day is different than Veterans Day, which is where all the veterans are, thank you for your service and all that kind of stuff. This is specifically for remembering all of the fallen, people who have fallen in all the wars that we've had, and to remember the sacrifice they made. And there was a very solemn ceremony at Arlington Cemetery today, which is something that the U.S. presidents typically do every year on this. And today there was speeches by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, Vice President JD Vance, and President Donald Trump. And all of them made some really nice comments. They really meant them real heartfelt. But I guess got to tell you, I have a bit of a different view than a lot do. And I was a little uncomfortable, I'll say, with some of the comments, as heartfelt as they may have been. And I know that especially of all the widows, the war widows that they were talking about, many of whom they had on site there, some of the children of some of the fallen, they were on location there. They were recognized by the president. And obviously no family member of the fallen wants their family member to have died for no reason. They want it to have mattered. They want it to mean. And that was on display throughout all these speeches today, is that I think the Secretary of Defense said that all these people who have died in the current wars here fought and died defending their country. Yeah, but did they? Did they fight and die defending their country? And they all the speakers at one point or another mentioned the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and the wars going on currently in the Middle East, the conflicts in there. And it is hard to argue that a single one of them was to defend our future, was to defend our country. Obviously, the Vietnam War was a disaster. The North Vietnamese won that war. Of course, you may recall, or maybe you don't, JFK, before he was assassinated, I think like literally days before, had signed a memorandum. He wanted to get us out. There was, I think, 6,000 advisors there at the time. And he says, you know what, this is a losing proposition. Let's get them out of there. And then Lyndon Johnson said, yeah, let's don't do that. And then as soon as JFK died, within days, he reversed that course of action. And we know what happened since then. Tens of thousands of Americans died. Hundreds of thousands were wounded and suffered PTSD, et cetera. And at the end of the day, all this we warned about is, the domino effect. Well, no other dominoes fell. The North Vietnamese did win. The South Vietnamese suffered these huge losses. And then today, Vietnam does business with us. We kind of use them as a bulwark against China. Of course, you have the Iraq War that started in the Gulf War, the one where I fought in 1991. And we never left after that. We continued on with 10 years of sanctions with the northern no-fly zone, a southern no-fly zone. Then that turned into the 2003 war and the alleged weapons of mass destruction, which weren't there. And of course, we all know how that works. So we stayed there forever. And what did we do? We ended up getting rid of Saddam Hussein, the dictator there, and replacing it with a very repressive government, which repressed its own population so much that laid the foundation for the rise of ISIS. And then Obama sent us right back in even after we get out. We lost thousands of troops killed, tens of thousands wounded, hundreds of thousands more PTSD. And at the end of the day, what do we have? Instead of a bulwark against Iran, which we claim is our mortal enemy in the region, we now have a country that's friendly with Iran. So congratulations, that was great. And of course, can't not say something about Afghanistan. Taliban were there the day that we started fighting. The Taliban were there the last day we fought. The Taliban are there today. So all of these fights that had nothing to do with American national security, even if you want to have the narrow band of saying that after 9/11, because we were told that Osama bin Laden was there and the Taliban were helping, et cetera, and you wanted to punish them, okay, then after you punished them, you should have left. But instead, we stayed, and then we had 2 decades of casualties and people that are still in trauma and suffering psychologically from all that. And here's the problem. Now, in these days, and others like it, we give praise to these people. The ones who were hurt and killed especially, but also to those who were survivors, like the president did today. But what we end up doing is we say things like all the speakers today, and I saw some of the other ceremonies around the country also, talk about how our freedom is guaranteed by these people. We sleep safe at night because of the sacrifices these people. And folks, hear me, as someone who has 4 combat deployments myself, my grandfather on my mother's side fought in World War II. My grandfather on my father's side fought in the trenches of World War I in France. I come from a long history of sacrifices and service to the country. And I'm telling you, especially in the modern era, we are not safer because of the sacrifices we have made. If you want to honor the men and women who serve, and especially if you want to honor the memory of those people who have already laid down their lives that they intended to be only for our defense, then let's stop this process of making more people die for something that's not in American national defense, something that's not in American national defense. When I signed up to serve, when everybody I know I've ever met in my entire 21 plus year active career, when they volunteered to serve, it was to defend our country. It was to defend our way of life, defend from an attack by another country. It was not to put pressure on Russia by going into Eastern Europe. It was not to go into Somalia to try to take care of some terrorist organization that's a threat to the governments of the region in Africa or Niger or wherever else, or to help a certain civil war group in Syria, or to help a civil war group in Libya, or somebody in Syria. All those. That's not why any of us signed up. If you want to honor our troops, if you want to give respect to those who have sacrificed their lives, let's make damn sure nobody else sacrifices their life on something that's not in America's interest, and when our interests are not even threatened. That is my message for Memorial Day. And I want to remember my fallen fellow soldiers who have died because they were not doing so, in at least in my lifetime, in any ways that were necessary for our national security. Let's don't repeat that again.